Get great deals on the latest phones, tablets, and business apps with O2 Business. Hey guys, Basil here with BTech, comparing the HTC 10 with the HTC One A9. The One A9 is the first device that arrived in the UK bringing this kind of styling. Fingerprint scanner, which is a capacitive button. We have seen it in past devices released in the US and in Taiwan before, but the A9 really was the first to herald this new design language. And we thought the HTC 10 would be exactly the same, just a bit bigger and a bit better, but it isn't. It's actually pretty different. Okay, from the front it looks identical, but around the back it's really heavily beveled, not bezeled. It kind of looks like a Batmobile, like Batman's suit of armor. Really bold, really masculine design, but it's also got a curvature to it that makes it nice and ergonomic in the hand, as opposed to the sheer flat back on the HTC One A9. The HTC 10 is also spec-tastic, so it makes sense we jump into that. But before I do, subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel. It's how you're going to stay on top of everything that we do. Right, back to these two phones. It's 5 inches of AMOLED Full HD screen versus 5.2 inches of SLCD 5 Quad HD screen. You've also got a higher resolution camera on the HTC 10. It's a 5 megapixel snapper. Well, not necessarily high resolution, but what it definitely is higher spec. It's image stabilized and it also has autofocus. You've got a speaker to the left of it, front firing speaker with a bottom firing speaker as well. Both kind of double up to give you a kind of treble subwoofer effect. You've got capacitive buttons either side, so HTC's reintroduced this from old HTC devices by contrast to the on-screen buttons, and HTC's also ditched the logo on the front, which is actually good if it means that it uses up a little bit less space. In fact, I will say, despite the fact that the HTC One A9 has a smaller screen, it is taller, so that goes to show that they've managed to squeeze in stereo or front firing speaker as opposed to a bottom firing speaker, and still manage to keep the screen to bezel ratio pretty respectable. As far as the key ports go, you've got a USB Type-C at the base, and that's very good future-proofing right there. You've got a micro SD card slot on the left of both devices, and these are really good because they're expandable, but not just regularly. You can actually adopt the storage into internal storage, and as a result end up with a phone that you can install apps onto the micro SD card, fixing many of the Android bugbears that gamers in particular have come to know over the years. As far as the audio goes, both actually export a really decent level of audio quality, but you actually have high-res audio output on the HTC 10 as well as high-res audio headphones in the box. Really, really great stuff, because most of the phones that can support it don't do that and therefore never get to flex that muscle. 12 megapixel camera around the back versus a 13 megapixel camera around the back, both optically image stabilized, dual flashes on both, although you've got laser autofocus on the HTC 10, NFC on both devices. So you can clearly tell the HTC 10 is a flagship phone. Even though the HTC One A9 looks relatively flagship with its metal frame and its real attention to detail as far as design goes, it is a mid-ranger. Under the hood, it's a Snapdragon 617 processor paired with either 2 or 3 gig of RAM depending on your region, by contrast to a Snapdragon 820 with 4 gigabytes of RAM. That means this one is going to be the gaming beast of the two. But internals are going to be different, but still, I didn't really encounter too much slowdown with the HTC One A9, he says with a slight stutter on screen. Gaming generally is good as long as you don't throw too many fast-paced 3D games at it and emulators, etc. As far as the interfaces go though, they are well optimized. They both feel like they're very nice and responsive. HTC does wonders with optimization. They're very similar as well. You've got Sense, and the most stock versions of Sense to date, the HTC M9 the HTC 10 Sense is in fact that little bit more stock, because rather than have all the applications like gallery and the various web browser, HTC web browser, and elements that you've come to know from HTC, you've actually just got one of everything. So one web browser, you've got Google Photos, you've got HTC's camera experience, which means you won't have the Google camera experience. You've got Google Calendar, which means you don't have HTC Calendar. So it's a much easier experience for newbies to get their heads heads around. You don't have to decide which of the applications you want to use. You do still have blink feed, you do still have that overview, and everything else is pretty much identical. Pull down notifications tray, 2-tier, you can jump into your settings through it. The settings are actually made more stock on the HTC 10. Now, as far as the cameras go, image stabilized across both. They actually have different user interfaces. So HTC has done wonders with making the Pro mode really quickly accessible. You just drag from the top of the screen and tap through on Pro mode. You can also quickly access panorama and Zoe camera this way, or jump straight through to video, hyperlapse, slow motion, selfie photo, selfie video, or the settings. Like I said, it is a 12 megapixel camera, and as a result shoots photos in 12 megapixel by default, and that means 6:4 or thereabouts, not 16:9 aspect ratio. Quick to focus, quick to fire. HTC says it's also the fastest focusing camera on the block. Really like the One A9 camera, so if it's better than that in any respect, then I'll be happy, because this was better than the One M9 camera ahead of it. So fingers crossed, the HTC 10 is the best camera kit on the block. HTC certainly thinks it is, and so does DXCO Mark. We'll see how it fares in real life. In addition to that, this is available with either 16 or 32 gig internal memory versus a 32 gig internal memory on the HTC 10. And that's pretty much the crux of it. The final thing to talk about is connections and battery life, and both will support super fast internet speeds, Cat6 LTE, all of that jazz. But one thing that you will get on the HTC 10 is a much more capacious battery at 3000 milliamps by contrast to 2150. The Snapdragon 617 processor, however, is very efficient. HTC does optimizations very well, and as a result, we didn't find that this died too early, probably around 6-7 p.m, which is relatively standard for a smartphone today. Hopefully you enjoyed this quick comparison, or maybe not so quick comparison. If you did, click that thumbs up button, like the channel, subscribe. That's how you'll stay on top of everything that we do. Thanks for watching BTech. Get great deals on the latest phones, tablets, and business apps with O2 Business.